So, we need to talk about your stats final project. And I wanted to make this when I could actually talk, and didn't have to cough every 22 seconds, but here we are. Your final project comes with a lot more freedom than the previous projects, so let's talk through the steps that you'll need to complete it. Step number 1, assemble your group. That's right, you get to pick your own groups this time, so buddy up with the people that you feel like you work well with, and make a group. Groups generally have 5 people in them, but not every class has a total number of students that's divisible by 5, so some groups are going to need to have 4 people in them. If you want your group to be one of the 4 people groups, come talk to me. It's first come, first serve. Step 2. Submit a proposal. I love the final project because it's so wide open. You get to ask your own research questions and then get your own answers by gathering your own data through experiments, observational studies, or surveys. You get to be a statistician, but I need you to tell me what you're planning to do. That way I can advise you on whether or not you're actually meeting the goals of the course and aligning with the requirements for the project. It'll also help me to advise you on whether I think you're trying something too basic or too ambitious. Or, something illegal.
So, Jordan, you want to tell them? That's kind of what we're thinking.
Yeah, we really wanted to test whether men or women could better detect laxatives that have been unknowingly slipped into their McFlurries.
You guys know you can't do that, right?
Why can't we do that?
Why not? Because their ice cream machine's broken.
Oh
gosh.
Ice
Okay.
cream machine.
Yeah.
So what all goes on the proposal? Well, for starters, I'll need the names of all the people in your group. After that, you'll need to ask 2 research questions, not just 1. Now, these research questions need to come from Chapter 3 and beyond. So you're going to want to look at things like comparing 2 proportions, like we did in Section 3.2, comparing means, like we did in 3.3, looking at paired data, like we did in 3.4, comparing multiple proportions, like Sections 4.1 and 4.2, comparing multiple means, like in 4.3, or if you're ambitious, you could look at something with 2 quantitative variables, like we'll look at it when we get to Chapter 5. Remember, you need 2 research questions, but they're all coming from the same experiment, the same data, so they're probably going to be pretty similar to each other, and that's okay. In your proposal, tell me what your research questions are and why you think that they're interesting questions to look at. Another thing that the proposal asks you for is how you're planning on collecting your data and what variables you're going to be examining once you do. There's really only a couple of ways to collect data here. One would be to do a survey, like the one that you did for our class, the Google form that you filled out. You could make your own Google form and send it out for people to answer.
Do you have a bicycle air pump and the weird little pin thingy that always goes missing?
Do you prefer your mayonnaise smooth or crunchy?
Have I ever imagined eating a squirrel? Well, I have now.
Your other option is to actually do an experiment and gather data.
No difference. No difference.
Whatever method you take, you want to make sure that you've got a pretty big sample size. All of the experiments that I've done in class have had pretty small sample sizes because all I've had is you. I can only have samples of 28, 26, what have you, because that's all the people I've got in the room. But in a real statistical study, you want to make sure you've got a good amount of data to work with. So it'd be best to have at least 100 pieces of data if you can manage it. So on the proposal, I'll ask you about your sample size and the variables you're collecting. What is your explanatory variable? What's your response variable? What statistical tests are you going to run? One of the last things I'm going to ask for on your proposal is for you to list any relevant resources out there that are connected to your topic. Whatever it is that you're thinking about, somebody else has probably already thought of it first. Because we thought of pretty much everything by now. You've heard that there's nothing new under the sun. Oh, but there are some wonderful things under the sun, and I've seen the most incredible studies. Everything from whether fish have feelings, to whether pigeons are able to distinguish between good children's paintings versus bad children's paintings, or the effects of cocaine on honeybee dancing. Researchers have done pretty much everything at this point, so whatever it is that you're thinking about, somebody else has probably thought of it already. That's okay, it doesn't have to be completely original. Just give it a Google, look and see if there's any articles that are already looking at the thing that you're looking at, and then use that as motivation, or inspiration, or verification. That's something in stats that doesn't get enough credit. I do have an example proposal up on Moodle in the projects folder if you want to see what an example of a good proposal should look like. Step 3, collect your data. You've got everything you need at this point to actually do your experiment, or your observational study, or your survey, or whatever it is that you're doing. Keep good records of your data in Excel, or Google Sheets, or OpenOffice, if that's even still a thing anymore, I don't actually know. One thing that I'd recommend here is before you start collecting your data, write up a short outline of exactly what it is that you're going to do. One of the biggest mistakes that students make in this final project is not really understanding the connection between the data that they're gathering and the test that they're going to run. What data you gather, what variables you look at determines what analysis you can do. Are you gathering categorical data or quantitative data, right? That's going to determine whether you're able to analyze proportions versus means. Are you getting something that's paired? Are you having multiple groups that you're examining, right? All of these things matter to what test that you're going to run. So write up a short outline of what exactly it is that you're planning to do so that you'll have a good eye on what exactly it is that you're doing. Step 4, prepare your paper and your presentation. The presentation will probably feel very similar to your previous presentation, but there's a lot more to say this time. You can go into more detail on your research question and why you thought of it and why it's interesting to you. Tell us about your null and alternate hypotheses, and tell us about how you gathered the data and what that process looked like. And then you can go into your results and talk about statistical significance, talking about generalization. Can you generalize to a broader population? And if so, what? Can you conclude anything about causation? Or are you rejecting your null hypothesis? All of those things would appear in a good presentation. For your paper, you'll want to split the paper up into 9 different sections. Your title and authors, an abstract, background and significance, the methods you used, the results you got, any discussion around it and conclusions that you draw, and then your references, an appendix, and a database that includes your data. Yeah, I could prattle on about it here, but you'll probably get more out of the PDF that's under the projects folder up on Moodle that goes through the final project. Head over to the section on the paper guidelines, and it goes into those sections a little bit more in depth. Just the things that I want to point out here is, first of all, the papers do have a 4-page limit. Should be 12-point font, single-spaced. It does not say what fonts you're allowed to use, but I'm going to go ahead and say Times New Roman, just so that people don't go looking for loopholes out here. I want to read a whole paper in wingdings. Is wingdings still a thing? The final project folder on Moodle has a lot of great resources here too, along with the description and the proposal and examples of the proposal and the places to upload all of the pieces of your project. It's got a lot of great examples, like an example appendix, an example paper, or, if you're invested, an example of a good final paper. But it's also got things like a link to Web of Science for helping you find references for your resources. It's got a nice little tutorial here, an example of how to write a good abstract. It's got the rubrics for the slides and the paper. And it also has a link here for the group evaluation of the project. After the project is over, I'll have you all fill that out so that you can evaluate both how you feel like you contributed to your group and how each of your teammates did as well. The PDF gives some great descriptions on what each of those sections should look like. It talks about the length of your abstract, what should be in the appendix, what should be in the database. The database is essentially the collection of your data. And if you were collecting quantitative data, this is a good place to actually list out everything that you've got. If you were doing nothing but categorical and just comparing proportions, you can get away with just like a two-way table here, and that's perfectly fine. Pay attention to how you're citing your sources. making sure that those are all cited correctly. You can list, figures and things in there, and that is all part of the 4-page limit. But the appendix and database are something that's external. They don't count towards your 4-page limit. That's about it. If you're looking for some ideas on what your project could be, come talk to me. We can brainstorm some things together. But be creative. I'm eager to see what you all come up with. Please, as always, reach out to me if you have any questions. Have fun, and I'll see you.